And I'm going to pass over to Michaela.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Hopefully, has the echo gone now? Fantastic. Welcome, everybody, from the Bethlem Horticultural Garden, the Wall Garden here at the Bethlem Royal Hospital. Hottest day of the year. I don't know whether that's a good omen or not, but it's nice to be in this really, really sunny space and just to think about the other spaces, the elsewhere spaces of the hospital. Today's the last day of our current exhibition, Elsewhere, which looks at spaces of radical openness. And many of the artists, or some of the artists, have actually made work specifically for the grounds, the extensive grounds of the hospital. So we thought it'd be a really nice way to celebrate the final day of the exhibition, to speak to you directly from this green space and to think a little bit about art, ecology, health and mental health. And I'm really pleased that we've got two speakers joining us. We've got Sergio Heredero, who's the horticultural therapist here at the Bethlem Royal Hospital. And we've got Billy Stiles, who is a green recovery ranger, I think, at the Mount Vernon Cancer Centre Care. He'll talk about his own biography a little bit later. Sorry, Billy, if I've misdescribed you. But we're going to have a bit of a conversation about different projects that go on in different spaces in London and the surrounding areas, and why access to green spaces in NHS environments is an important and valuable thing. So Sergio is going to talk for maybe 15 minutes, and then Billy is going to chip in for another 15 minutes, and then we're going to have 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the presentations for a bit of a Q&A. So I'll pass over to Sergio.
Thank you, Miguel. So yeah, my name is Sergio. I've been working here as a horticultural instructor, therapist, there are many names for that, for the last 4 years. Basically, the garden itself, it belongs to the main occupational therapy department. We have quite a huge variety of different activities included in the department itself. And the garden is a bit of a satellite from the main department. So we are fortunate enough to have a walled garden, which is roughly 1/3 of an acre. It's not very big, but it's very diverse. So it's organized in different areas. We have like greenhouses, we have wildlife spaces, we grow fruits, vegetables mainly. So it has many different parts to it that it makes, like as a whole, like an enclosed ecosystem. We are quite big in sustainability, so we try to minimize the input while maximizing the output. The output of the garden is huge. It's not only just having the access to a green space, as beautiful as this is, but also the therapeutic aspects of it. We pretty much run horticultural therapeutic sessions every day, morning and afternoon, offering our services to absolutely all the wards of the hospital. The hospital itself is organized in different wards, each of them are specialized in different conditions. But here in the garden, actually, we work with all the wards from the hospital. This is one of those unique places where people from different wards, they can mix together and share experiences, and also get involved in gardening and share some of their experiences, like being in a psychiatric hospital. So that would be a bit the overview of what is the space. Basically, there's loads of research about what are the benefits of horticultural therapy. So within the outputs, the benefits of horticultural therapy, we have a different range of different sessions that we run here in the garden. As I mentioned before, it's quite varied. So the sessions normally are in a group setting. We roughly have something like 30 plus staff accompanying patients. People come into the sessions weekly. So the groups might be 5, 6 people at a time. But yeah, we work as a group and we always invite the staff to participate within the group as well. It's quite unusual too. Mainly because it's a completely different environment rather than being awards for the staff. It's purpose-built too. During COVID times, actually, it was pretty amazing. It was the only occupational therapy activity that never stopped. Let's put it that way. So we were fortunate enough to be able to keep going with the gardening activities, which actually showed up how important this is from the point of view of being outdoors to actually being able to still socially interact with others despite of being in a pandemic, which was quite fundamental. From there, I'd like to go very quickly because there's loads happening in the gardens. It's quite difficult to condense it without overwhelm the audience. So literally, we have a different theme for each of the sessions happening during the week. And pretty much we have 2 different blocks of sessions. One that is more a therapeutic session, which is more open to the needs and choices of what the service users would like to do in the garden. And the second one, to which one they can actually, so attending the open ones, they can go towards the second block, which would be the vocational sessions. The vocational sessions, we try to emulate what a job would be on a much more relaxed way. But after attending open sessions, they could go to the vocational sessions. We learn a bit what are the requirements of a job, learn new skills, and also on top of that, they get paid a wage for that time that they spend in the garden. So from the point of view of therapy, it's quite beneficial because it's not just the motivation of the money, but it enhances the feeling of they are contributing to the garden itself and also being rewarded in exchange, not only for its therapeutic benefits, but also for the money that they earn. Some people here in the hospital, unfortunately, there are no sources of income. So even every little helps out. Now we'll go very quickly, as I said, through the groups. So we have a group, part of what we produce here in the garden, which, as I said, is focused on food production. That's pretty much my background. Happens in the therapeutic kitchen. The therapeutic kitchen, we process leftovers and surplus coming out from the garden. So that will get transformed into jams, chutneys. We take the opportunity of baking, with dry fruit, with dry herbs, anything that we might be able to be capable with the equipment that we have in the kitchen pretty much. The second session that will happen on a Wednesday, the first one happens now on Mondays. The second one will be a harvest group. We have a tiny weenie shop, which actually works quite well. It's organized as a box scheme, so people pre-order according to what is available, and they come and collect. The shop is pretty amazing because it gives you also the opportunity to connect with other people from the hospitals. It gives you access to people that we normally don't see in the hospital. It's open to staff, general public, and also it provides an income to the project itself, which reverts money paying patients, buying equipment, seeds, and so on. Now, we have a session which is very important too, which is we have orchards on site. They are outside the old garden. There are orchards that they were here initially when the hospital got set up over here. So we are talking about 100 years old orchards. They are mainly Bramley apples. However, we have like another tiny orchard that is bitters. So we have roughly 26 different varieties of heritage apples on site, which, yeah, we are quite fortunate about it. That orchard actually wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration of London Orchard projects, which helped clearing it up and making it accessible to the groups that we run to actually enjoy that environment and pick the apples, which is an amazing resource for the garden too. They will be kitchen, they will be sold in the shop. Then on top, we do a 1 day off every year, which is the harvest celebration. Which during that day, basically we press fresh apple juice, which is something that you cannot find anymore because it's unpasteurized. So it's pretty amazing. It happens just on that day. And also it's a reason to gather together, patients and stuff, and yeah, have a pretty good day. So that would be one of the examples of events happening in the garden. There are many others. Right now, the pumpkins are just, to put an example, they are just getting ready just in time for Halloween. That gives us the opportunity of also mixing gardening with art. So we organize pumpkin carving sessions for Halloween. Now the flesh will go to the kitchen once we empty the pumpkins. So again, it will go towards chutney. So as you can see, there's still that thing of no waste in the garden. Other events that we've been doing actually not long ago with the gallery as well. Michaela was very kind of organizing that. It was common in Bethlem, wasn't it? In which one we did a mini landscape workshops, in which one we were kind of supporting people creating mini landscapes. It's like a bit of an on-site session, creating a whole mini version of a garden, pretty much. A part of those events we have hosted. We collaborate with our own department as well. So we have an art section in our department. We've been holding art in the garden sessions. We provide resources for artists, flowers, to a place to draw and so on. So the garden itself is used as a venue. It's used as a therapeutic environment. It's used to produce food. I mean, I never realized how much it comes out of the garden itself, how much it has to offer. Till actually I do these sort of things, and I tell people about it is when I realize how much a project like this has to offer. And particularly here in the hospital, it's quite obvious. Patients, we have many that they hate gardening. They end up loving it. There is always a very strong link, which is food. But we have food in the garden as well is fundamental. For me, it goes together. Growing, eating, it just goes together. So yeah, we have a very, very wide reach. And yeah, hopefully I haven't spoken too much. I was trying to give an overview, but as I said, yeah, it's quite a complex project and quite a full one. So I think I would be happy also to share my email. So any questions? We will have a few minutes now for questions and answers. More than happy to participate on that.
I think, thank you so much, Sergio. I think it's difficult, isn't it, to kind of represent everything that this space means, I think, across the hospital. But I suppose the bigger picture that I wanted to point out that it's part of occupational therapy. So occupational therapy here in Bethlem Royal Hospital kind of encompasses all kinds of different activities. We're really lucky that we've got a very well equipped art studio, a ceramic studio, a woodwork studio. We have a walled garden. And so when people spend any time in the gallery, they can actually be referred to different kind of useful occupations. And really the history of having kind of gardening and animal husbandry and art in a psychiatric hospital context goes back many hundreds of years, really back to kind of perhaps even medieval times. And it's something that's kind of persisted ever since. So clearly there is a very direct benefit, and anybody who works, I think, within occupational therapy can see immediately what those kind of benefits are. increasingly we're asked to kind of quantify those benefits, I suppose, in different ways, to measure them, almost to get some kind of, to demonstrate some return on investment. And that's something that we kind of struggle with again and again, I think, because it's difficult, isn't it, to kind of measure certain kind of experiences or kind of a certain kind of quality of experience. And I think that's something that Billy, Sergio and I discussed very briefly when we got together preparing for this presentation. I don't know what everybody thinks about whether you can measure the benefits of engagement with nature. I think many kind of people from different disciplines have tried, but it's difficult to kind of like quantify statistically in numbers, neurologically perhaps. Some people have tried, but I think the fact that kind of gardening activities, animal husbandry, art, all of these kind of vocational activities that kind of happen in hospitals have been going on for so long, it's a testament to the kind of that belief that these activities are inherently of value. But I'm going to pass over to Billy now. Maybe he can kind of reflect on some of those bigger questions as well, apart from talking about some of his project that he's been involved in. But you're on mute, yeah. Billy.
So yeah, exactly. It's really interesting to look at, so many different types of spaces are designed in different ways, and they're all at different stages of that design. And it's only going to make us more resilient when we try and pull together all of those, all the different learning that different sites have. Just off the top of my head, talking about different sites, it's very interesting, as you say, about trying to measure impact. One of the roles of the job that I'm doing at the moment is to develop these projects, and we're developing with Natural England and Hillingdon Council to try and create some a network of link workers and practitioners within the green social prescribing area, and just that one thing is a way that we can then, if we can set up some pilot schemes, we can then assess and then evaluate, and then that can feed back into the bigger picture. But the interesting thing is that each site is very different in the way that not only the environment is different as in the natural world, but all surrounding you is completely different resources. So if we want to be resourceful with how we develop each site, we have to be specific to that site. So when we're creating these models, there has to be that flexibility to allow that each specific site can then develop in its own way. But then that learning goes back into the model to sort of some overarching themes. So that was just off the, before I sort of introduced myself, I just thought it was really interesting what Sergio was talking about, and how every site is very different. So I've been in my position now for nearly a year now, like 9 months, and it started off very much as evaluating the previous person that was in the role. So it was evaluating that, it was putting together all of these reports that she had done and what I had done, and then making any design that you have sort of include all the stakeholders in that proposal. So then you would then put a proposal forward, and it would be then estates that could then be able to say yes or no, and it would be all health and safety. And it's just been such an interesting journey that I've been on with my specific hospital in all of those relationships with all the different actors. And it's and so I'm funded by the Eastern North Hearts charity, but I work for the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. So it's a very sort of interesting project in that way that it's put together. But it is for us to for me to create projects and then measure the impact of them, so that we can then use that as data and information. If it's like qualitative or whatever kind of data it is, we can then write that up, and we can then, other hospitals and other spaces can then see how useful that is, and see if it is useful for their specific space. Because I've actually been to quite a few hospitals within, and there's so many spaces that have lots of green space, but then there's so many hospitals that are more in like city centers that don't have so much space, but they've got a pool of resources there. They've got people that want to come and use the space. So you can be so creative with edges. You can be so creative with, like, you know, the amount of time people can come in. So it's really, really, really interesting to see those different models of the way that you design. So yeah, so for me, it coming back to that area of design, you know, I've very much you know, studied permaculture, and that is it's just a design system. It's how you design your space. It's not just about, you know, organic growing. It's about being, you know, resourceful with the space around you. So so from there, I was the you know, the green space project coordinator at Stepney City Farm, and we were doing all the, you know, like all what Sergio was saying, you know, just like no plastic, you know, zero chemicals, you know, no dig, you know, perennials, you know, all of these great things that we're trying to build, you know, build resilience through, you know, the biodiversity. And that's, you know, it's great, and we're doing it by empowering people, and it's also about, you know, we can then empower people to then produce a little bit more. And if everybody is just producing 1% more and consuming 1% less, even if it's a few people, we are going in a direction that I think is going to, you know, try and, you know, at least going in a way where we can feel that we are, you know, there is that strength of resilience, even if, you know, we're losing to big corporations that are building everywhere. If we have the underlying thread of that knowledge, that we have these models, that when something does happen, we have this that we can then, you know, fall back on. So yeah, I'm going in very many loops here, but I think I'm trying to go in a loop and then bring it back together, and go in the loop and bring it back together. So in so for the moment, we're in the projects that I'm designing, we have, you know, so for local schools, for example, we've invited local schools to come, and we, you know, Mount Vernon, I'm at Mount Vernon in Northwood, and at the Mount Vernon Cancer Centre there, and we have about 33 acres of hay meadow. So it's, you know, huge, you know, space, which is amazing. And then we have like about an acre of where we have this kind of like a garden setting, which is a flower meadow, and it's got a small polytunnel, and we're trying to just put in some more trees. So this area is where I've focused on different groups coming to the site and just, you know, trying to do some very simple, you know, green activities. Like, you know, we have lots of seed sowing in the spring with lots of schools coming. And it was, you know, just the type of seeds that we're sowing, you know, are very resilient, and they're easy to look after, and they're edible. You know, they're multifunctional, all the elements of different types. And, you know, in a way that is then helping us change slightly the consumer choice and influence. So we can start to think about what we actually eat and how it's grown, and rather than just relying on, you know, eating and growing spinach, where we can be growing amaranths, for example. And, you know, that's just a small thing that, you know, it would be very beneficial for, you know, for everybody if we just changed our, like, sort of taste buds a little bit. So yeah, so local schools have been coming, and then it is about, you know, the students have come, and we've created a space where they can then revisit and come again, or so it's about that little first sort of interaction. And I think we mentioned about it before, and it was about how we can sort of, we're not trying to sell how green something can make us feel better, but it is about that accessibility for people to come and feel protected, to feel like, yeah, this is something that it's changed my mind about. You know, it's not all about, you know, dirt, and it's not clean, and it's bugs, and it's not there. So as a space for a hospital to feel nurtured when you come here, to feel protected, there's that bridge that I think we need to think about, which is those techniques of that initial sort of first time that you are in contact with sowing a seed, or the first time you see a sort of an animal or something, and those things are really, you know, they can be really planned, rather than just rely on just coming to nature and let's just do an activity. I think we can really plan those things and be really specific with how we introduce people to nature, and that's not just children, that's, you know, that's adults as well. It's the whole range of people that we are then trying to, you know, almost there's many examples, but it's also good to bring up examples about, people not knowing the difference between a bee and a wasp. And it was, it's great to be able to, to really think, yeah, that's a fair point. We should be thinking about how can we differentiate between those two insects, and why are they, why is one seen as so beneficial and the other not? So that's just like one sort of area. So we've got local schools. We have Duke of Edinburgh people come. We have the social responsibility for businesses come. We had Sky come a lot to come and help out on site, and we have like the green the green volunteers that come on a Monday, and one of the talking about like mental health. We've just, like last month, we've just finished this 6-week art and nature program that I ran with an art therapist who works at the Linda Jackson Center. And so she's an artist. My background is also in art. And so we built this for cancer patients. And it was really interesting to see some of the feedback that we've had from those sessions in a way of really seeing how beneficial it can be to patients to come and be in a place where you can observe nature. You can really see the impact straight away of how people sort of feel. It's very clinical, their diagnosis, and it's very clinical, and it's very top down, and it's very structured. It's very like scientific, and that's only one aspect about how people see things. And it's very interesting to then take the that clinical space out, and then actually we are part of nature, and there's some really, really interesting things that we can do in nature, and techniques that we can learn about creativity in nature that could really help us and help everybody. Again, coming back to making hospitals feel a nurturing place. And I think that's something maybe we'll discuss later, is about, how we are designing our green space, especially in NHS green space, to be an area that is utilized rather than just maintained. And that is also part of the, monetizing it. It's not just about, ticking boxes as in, we need biodiversity to be increased, but it's also about actually this is, saving us money. It's economically viable. We also need to be turning it upside down, how we're looking at the green space in hospitals. So I think that's what's, the sort of the most interesting part of all the projects that I'm working on, is that it's very early days. They're all pilot sort of schemes. We're not at the more of an end stage where we already have these things in place, but it's a really great space, and it's really enabling the charities that have created the positions that I have, the Nature Recovery Ranger that we have, 3 others in other hospitals on a similar scheme and a similar way of learning in different ways. So it's those little projects that we're getting, how much is it, can we measure the impact, and how much then can we learn from it, and how much can we then spread that information with other spaces that we can find some these are the obstacles, and we need to find those obstacles so that we can then find the solution to them. And that's where, coming back to being an artist, that's the creative thing for me. That's where where I before, when I was studying art and having exhibitions in different countries, the way that I learned was finding out what is the obstacle, finding the solution. But in that finding the solution is that creativity. And I think that's where when I was younger, that's how I would learn. I would learn by doing it. I know we have all different types of learners, but that was how I would learn, would be, I want to find a way of overcoming that. And that's the interesting thing. And that's what interests me in why I'm working in this field, is because I find it every day so interesting in how we overcome for me, it's the most pressing issues, is the climate crisis and how we're going to face it. And there's just so many different ways that people are trying to overcome it. There's very technological ways of overcoming it, and then there's very much hands-on. And I think we need both, but those hands-on can actually give us something we can do. The technological ones are, sometimes they're out of reach. We don't understand all these technologies, and it's all so far away. Whereas, you can learn how to plant a seed. You can learn these things, and all those little things will build up together. And that's where we keep our resilience. So my story has gone on in a lot of different ways, but hopefully it's raised some sort of discussion points that we can share, and maybe we don't agree, or maybe we disagree, but I think that's where we're going to find out the more interesting information.
I haven't got my glasses on, so I couldn't see the unmute button there. That's so great. Thank you so much, Billy. It just feels like 40 minutes to an hour is not really enough time to do anything but kind of begin a conversation. But I think it's really interesting, this idea of I was thinking about the overlap, I suppose, between kind of art and kind of like horticulture, and I know it happens kind of organically, I think, here at the Bethlem. There's lots of kind of like toing and froing, but I was listening this morning to an eco-feminist, Astrida Neymanis, who's an Australian theorist, and she was talking about the importance of the how, not the what. So she's really interested in methods, in doing, in being kind of immersed in an environment and coming up with strategies of doing to kind of approach problems. So that really, what you were saying, Billy, about kind of overcoming obstacles, of kind of almost like trying things in a particular site, in a particular set of circumstances and conditions. So kind of like working from conditions is part of the overlap, I think, between kind of art and kind of like ecology, which is super interesting. But I'm thinking as well about kind of the histories of hospitals, and the South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, of which the Bethlem Hospital is a part. We've got this huge hospital kind of in the centre of the city, the old Maudsley site, but we've also got the Lambeth site, and very often the specialist units that we have here at the Bethlem Royal Hospital, in all of these vast acres of greenery, there's constantly the argument of moving certain wards and certain kind of like units back into the city centre, away from this kind of 1930s idea of kind of sustaining people on the outskirts of a city. It seemed to be almost like kind of excluding or marginalizing kind of like people with kind of mental ill health on the outskirts of the city. And so there's all these kind of arguments that we need to bring people back into the center of the city. But I think those arguments kind of ebb and flow in different ways, because I think going back to the kind of very kind of like direct impact of kind of like people on the wards here, we used to do quite a lot of work with, we have a specialist eating disorder unit here at the Bethlem Gallery, and they used to come to the garden, they used to grow their own food and then use the produce from the garden in the occupational therapy kitchens to make their own food. So this idea that you're involved in every stage of the process of growing, of cultivating, of gathering produce, and then kind of like cooking with the project, the produce that you've grown, was seen as I said, kind of inherently therapeutic. And it's difficult to see, although I take your point, Billy, that you could kind of cultivate kind of, tiny green spaces within busy kind of city-based hospitals. It seems that, maybe it's a lack of my imagination, not being able to imagine how that would kind of go ahead on a kind of like a city-based site. But I think it's really fascinating about the kind of histories of kind of hospitals and hospitals that had kind of like gardens and farms going back to the Middle Ages, where it was seen as part of kind of what it means to be human, to kind of to grow things or to look after things, to care for things, was part of what makes us human. It wasn't, I don't think it was even thought of therapeutically. It's just a kind of an intrinsic human value, and I think maybe in some ways we're kind of returning back to that kind of idea now about what it means to be human and what it means to kind of care for things with others, as a way of kind of caring for ourselves, I suppose. I was going to kind of throw it open. I don't know whether you wanted to come back on something, Sergio, whether you wanted to kind of...
I could come back in too many things. So I think I'm going to jump just in this very bit that you were saying, because it was bringing a lot of things to mind. I mean, this hospital, when it established itself here in 1930, there was a milking parlor. There was a farm on site that had pigs, that had chicken, that had an amazing Victorian walled garden with glass houses. I mean, they were actually able to produce quite a lot of food for the original site. Eventually, all of that got lost. They kept the meadows, which are, again, they're actually protected. So there was all of that, and also I have done some reading about how the old settings of psychiatric hospitals. So psychiatric hospitals, there is a lot of factors to take into account about where you put it. In the old days, Bethlem itself used to be in central London. However, and this is a bit maybe my personal view, I think in the old days, psychiatric hospitals, they were used even as a jail, some sort of. So eventually it came out to this place. But if you have a look at the old-fashioned ones, Victorian psychiatric hospitals, they used to be on the greenery. They address the fact of involving the patients in gardening, tennis, and all of the bits, particularly gardening and cooking. I don't know to what extent, what I have read is that it was like financially viable. It made the cost of having a patient cheaper. That was something that they addressed. I think in a way, maybe later on, I haven't found anything that actually, you find loads of things about horticultural therapy and effects of the house, but not at that time. So later on, it came all of this body of research saying about that. In the old days, it was just purely they needed something to do. It was like the old-fashioned occupational therapy without being named as such. It was something that gave them meaning, that gave them a purpose for the day. Some other bits, I mean, when you think about psychiatric treatment, it's not only about talking therapies. It's not only about medication. Particularly in the NHS at the moment, there is a multidisciplinary team. So you have an occupational therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you have nurses, doctors. So there is all of those approaches. I'm not going to enter into the different weights of the different approaches, but the purpose is actually the person recovers using all of that. So yeah, I'm realizing I could go on and on, you know, but it's like, in a way, I just wanted to give that bit about the setup of the hospital, how beneficial it is to have access to green spaces. And coming back to Maudsley, in the past, I've been helping somebody that is trying to, because in Maudsley, it's still an old hospital, there are courtyard gardens in Maudsley. They're not open, that is the issue. So even if it's a smaller space like that, it's not that much about producing food, making like that sort of use of the space. It's just actually making it accessible to patients and staff. Just that it takes a lot, like hugely, to do very complex risk assessment. There has to be a person actually supervising the space. So it's actually the system itself doesn't allow much free access to these spaces which are there, particularly in a site like Maudsley Hospital. It's very restricted. You have Maudsley Hospital, you have King's College, then you have Ruskin Park, but you have to cross very busy roads. It's like quite isolated in a way, which I find quite not very therapeutic, to put it that way. Personally, when I mentioned before, they're moving wards back. Built huge. I mean, they're expanding, but they're expanding within that tiny bit. This is still concrete. They're thinking about moving many wards from here, particularly 3 of them. That might even increase. So it's like packing more people with less access to green spaces, which it sounds like. Don't really know the reasoning behind all of these moves, but yeah, for me, working here and seeing what is the effect of having access to all of this, it sounds like that would be, yeah, counterproductive, I think.
We've got Sue here, who's one of our artists who's been working in the garden. Great to see you, Sue. You're on mute, Sue.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies for not being there. It's just that I couldn't travel today. I'm just a lazy cow. I'm sorry, Sergio. I'm sorry about that, but no. So yeah, I apologize, but I was just going to respond to when there's accessibility gets reduced because of various urban planning that we can't control. It's about, I think, retaining the informatics so that the information trail doesn't get lost. So for instance, if you were at the Bethlem and you moved to the Maudsley where there are less green spaces, then you maintain the information trail so that people can know that they can come back to these green spaces. And so I think a lot of it is about information. And also, I think, I love the word, I don't know whether it was you, Billy, who said it, but or maybe you, Michaela. I mean, getting the idea across, particularly in psychiatric hospitals, that certain activities are inherently therapeutic. And it's a great word because people are less likely to question that word when, I mean, they might want the information about what it is that is inherently therapeutic. But I sometimes feel that the statisticians should stand back a bit and don't involve questionnaires, but have qualitative interviews. There's I mean, the idea that it's not, these things won't help everyone is specious, because you can't help everyone anyway. But if you're helping some people, then that should be enough. Some people have very rare cancers. You don't say we can't treat you because not enough of you people have this. Only 25% of people have a mental illness at some time in their life, but that doesn't mean to say you don't treat it. So the 100%, the measuring percentages seems to me specious, and it should be qualitative, and there should be interviews so that you don't have to constantly go on about justifying what it is that you're doing. Anyway, that's what I felt like saying.
Sue's been doing an amazing project here in the garden with Sergio, where she's kind of put a quadrat down, which is a kind of like a measurement system. It's like a little grid, a plastic grid, isn't it, Sue? And just letting things grow, and then just observing and documenting all the different little squares within the grid to see. No. Well,
no, I mean the plants, Michaela, got in the way of that. You know, the 5 centimeter squares, because, for instance, the Veronica persica has taken over the entirety of the top of the quadrat. It's now in seed, but it's what we were looking yesterday, Sergio. Perhaps you can help me. But as a result, it's like a little forest underneath the raised quadrat. And there's a lot of shade, so the only buggers that are getting on well in that area are the plantagos. But we've identified everything, I think, apart from one species. Sergio, I think we haven't got that one, but we've got a photograph. We've got a documentation of everything, and we now yesterday set up very scientifically, I must say, the camera with the tripod so that we can take frequent images and then from the same angle, and then put it on a do a GIF with a time-lapse thing so we can see the things going up and down or not reappearing, because a lot of them will be annual. But it's about micro documentation, and what I found so exciting about it is that even if you know nothing at the start of a project, when it's really constrained, then you really get to know a lot of things. And from one tiny bit of information, a whole world appears. So, for instance, I've got really into the philosophy of classification, meteorology, microclimates, measurement systems, nomenclature, the botanical language, and it's an artistic project, really. We're
I
not.
mentioned something else as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed as well. I mean, for me, it's kind of okay. Wherever I go, it's kind of my mind is that is that, that is that, that is that, that plant is that, and so on. That is my mind. Something that I noticed since we've been doing this project is that actually this project itself is like a microcosmos.
Yeah, exactly.
When you've been coming back to the project itself, you've been saying, "Oh, I saw that one in Peckham. Oh, I saw that one in Park." So actually, it's kind of expanding in a way.
Yeah, fat hen and redshank are everywhere in Peckham.
Right.
Fat hen in particular. And we're learning about the, some of the mythology behind some of these plants and what they were used for in the past. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Sergio. It's become, this tiny plot has become, a microcosm. And you couldn't have done it if we'd done the whole garden. It would just be too immense, too difficult, too time consuming. But this constraint is really, really helpful. So I was thinking, Billy, when you were mentioning documentation, I mean, sometimes it is for particular patients really useful to have a real constraint so that they can find out everything about that particular, whatever it is, object, plant, its history. And yeah, it's otherwise it can be a bit overwhelming, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. It's amazing. And Sue's actually got work as part of the current exhibition elsewhere, so it's really nice that you can be here this afternoon with us for the final day, Sue.
Yeah, absolutely. But then we are also, I mean, Sergio and I were also going to set up somewhere in that area of the walled garden undercover, the microscopes, and to encourage a little bit more looking at the world from at a different in a different optical way.
Absolutely, and that project's going to continue. So even though the exhibition comes down today, that's going to be a project that kind of continues throughout the year. I don't know who else we've got in the room. I can just see some faces and some names. I don't know whether for these final few minutes you want to open it out if anybody's got any questions. Would just like to say hello.
I can say hello. I don't have that much questions. I just stumbled on over the internet on your meeting today, so I was very curious to see what was going on, and yeah, I'm Vivian. Now I think that you can see that my name, yeah. And I'm an artist, and I'm really interested in ecology and nature, and also wild herbs mostly. So everything that's that has something to do with growing and also helping to discover ourselves is really important and interesting for me to get to know and to build up on to my art. Yeah, I'm right now planning an exhibition, but I'm still at the very beginning, so everything is really important for me to collect, kind of.
Microgreens. I've got the book. Somebody said that's not true. That can't be that. That's a load of nonsense. I said it's not. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. Microgreens. Completely skeptical. Just because some people don't think it's a good thing doesn't mean to say it isn't a good thing.
It's very important, I think, microgreens, and also I mean, I've got into wild herbs a little bit, not enough yet, but it's also very interesting to see how nature works and how important this is for our bodies as well. Not just the food we can grow in our gardens, but also what kind of food we can find in our forests and fields and everything. I think this is also really interesting.
There's a very good book on foraging, but I don't have it here. It's somewhere else. But there are some great books on foraging now. And there's
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
in the gallery, Jackie, who's one of the gallery assistants. She's totally into all that foraging malarkey. But she stepped away from it for a bit because she was pregnant, and she thought, well, I don't really want to, you know, the baby might not like these mushrooms. So, you know.
I think it's really interesting, and I mean, we wanted to kind of live stream from the garden today, just to encourage you all to visit. I think just to kind of whet your appetite, because it's an amazing resource. And one of the things that many people have told us, they don't realize that the hospital grounds are open to the public. So you can just walk through the gates and come and enjoy the orchards and the bluebell kind of walks in the spring. I mean, it's an extraordinary sight. People come to walk their dogs. We had the park run this morning. But unless you know that this is a public space, that it's open for you to use, people are very hesitant to visit. So we hope that this talk this morning, I know that Billy's going to come and visit, hopefully, in person. And it'll be the beginning of a kind of a longer relationship and a longer conversation. But do come and visit us if you ever get the chance, and come and visit us at the gallery and walk around the site. One of the things I suppose that really interests me is that for a hospital site, there are parts of it that are really kind of supervised and carefully controlled. But then if you wander off the path a little bit, you'll find wild areas, completely wild areas. So there's a real contrast between these kind of like manicured kind of like lawns that the estates kind of take really good care of, and where people are constantly observed and supervised. But you can just take a step beyond those boundaries and find yourself in kind of like a woodland area and wood piles and goodness knows what else, and they're completely wild. And sometimes I think nature, you know, we talk about rewilding, but I think the hospital grounds here give us the opportunity to kind of rewild ourselves, to allow ourselves, our own minds to kind of like wander, you know, beyond this kind of scrutiny. I think very often people in hospital environments feel that they're being observed, they're being scrutinized, and they use the grounds as a way of evading that scrutiny, or just maybe imagining themselves differently. So I would encourage everybody just to come and visit and experience the hospital for themselves. And now we're going to have a quick break, because Sergio is actually going to lead a physical tour to the orchards and around the green spaces of the hospital site. We wish you could be with us, but hopefully that's something for the future. But I'd just like to say thanks so much to Sergio, to Billy, and to Sue, and for everybody for coming to share the afternoon with us, and hope to see you again soon.
Got to wear a hat.
Got to wear
Sergio,
a hat and drink water as well.
Don't you forget to do the same.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great tour.
Thank you.